Hello, hello. Let me do my check-in with my tiny little book here of Anthony Trollope's an autobiography. Oh, here I can. No, I don't know where. Hopefully, I haven't lost the cover to an autobiography. This tiny little book that fits in my hand. So yeah, this is the autobiography of Anthony Trollope, published posthumously in 1883, pretty shortly after his death. He actually wrote it in like about 18. I think he was finished it up in like 1876. So he still had like another 8 novels to go, and not like inconsequential novels either. There's I think the Duke's Children is in there. Yeah, so there's he was still quite very much at the height of his powers at this point, writing his autobiography. And at the beginning of this, like just the little intro of it, it starts out with like the most devastating quote, which I would need my glasses for. Um, it's a quote from the editor of this edition in, I think, the 50s. And it's, Mr. Trollope's success as a novelist for the time he was writing was almost wonderful. The more so because, as soon as his death stopped his prolific pen, the author and the books died almost at the same time. For no one reads or thinks about Mr. Trollope's novels now. And yet, in his time, those who in society had not read his last novel were out of the fashion. And that was from The Random Recollections of an Old Publisher by William Tinsky in 1900. So it's like, wow, that's the damning thing at the very beginning of this. He died, and his novels just completely fell off the earth. And the introduction here by Sadler does kind of delve into like, well, what were the Michael Sadler was like, kind of delve a little bit into like, well, why did it just die? And a part of it was he was so prolific. He wrote so much and he had been going for so long that he was a bit out of his time by the end of his career. They'd moved on to other things, the aesthetics, to Oscar Wilde, very much kind of a different type of writing, a different kind of aims for writing. There's that, and the second thing was that this autobiography itself really contributed to a really negative view of Trollope, as his insistence on, like, I'm writing for money. This is how much money I got for this. I got for this book or that book. Very much going against the idea of the romantic writer in his garret, thinking only of his art. Is like, no, I'm 9 to 5 guy. I worked. I could chunk these things out. I got this amount of money for it. It's like there wasn't the romance that people were looking for in their authors. The idea, he was very much meat and potatoes, lower class, I would say, versus kind of exalted aristocracy of the artist. It's like, no, I'm a working writer. This is what I do, which I think is probably not as dismissed nowadays. At least, well, I don't know, even in literary circles nowadays, I would think that he's not really playing. He wouldn't be playing the publicity game even now of kind of getting the thing. So that's like that's the introduction, and then Trollope goes right into my education from 1815 to 1834. Though at the beginning. It does have a little thing about his son. Actually, first there's a preface by Trollope's son, Henry M. Trollope, which he left this book to the thing, and he says, it should be, it's to your discretion whether you should publish it. And then he kind of Henry sort of gives an outline of like what his father's life was like past then, including listing the all the novels that he did from Eye for an Eye in 1879 to Mr. Scarborough's Family in 1883, and that he had 4/5 of another story, the Land Leaguers, was about to be published, and left in manuscript in a complete novel called An Old Man's Love, which will be published in 1884. So I mean, he was such a machine. But that in the end that he was seized, but in 1882 he was seized by paralysis on his right side, accompanied by the loss of speech. His mind also failed, and he kept on going for 3 weeks, and then finally died the evening of the 6th of December, following nearly 5 weeks from the night of his attack. So that gives you kind of the end of Trollope. That isn't obviously 1876. Just a little summary there at the beginning of this is what my father's life was after he published this, all the other books he did. And then Trollope, we start with Trollope, which he says, in writing these pages, which for the want of a better name I shall be fain to call the autobiography of so insignificant a person as myself, it will not be so much my intention to speak of the little details of my private life as of what I and perhaps others round me have done in literature, of my failures and successes, such as they have been, and their causes, and the opening which a literary career offers to men and women for the earning of their bread, which I guess right at the beginning there, we're getting the economics, but also Trollope just being like, I'm an insignificant, how insignificant I am. But just that he's just gonna say, I'll just tell you all the stuff I can. Maybe not a tell all. This isn't as he said, he's more interested in the literary. And indeed, when I look at the chapter headings, there's a lot of the chapter headings are just his novels and him probably talking about them. But we start out with his boyhood, which sounds fucking miserable. His education, his father was basically impoverished, made terrible choices, decided he wanted to become a farmer, even though he had no experience. He had no experience, no education, nothing that would actually help contribute towards it. And he didn't even have any capital to kind of back up being a farmer. So he bought a couple of properties and was basically ended up living in squalor on the second one of them. His sons, he got into education, but just by hook or crook. And fucking lovely, the British social system, because Trollope was poor and in these schools, Trollope, just like I was, is unending misery. I was always in disgrace. I was always looked down upon. Being poor in this was an offense. That was a moral failing on his point. And ends up going to as the Harrow School, which and from 7 until there's a break in there. We went to another school, but then they couldn't afford it, and they went back to Harrow. He ended up walking 3 miles a day to get to school and back. So he was always dusty and filthy and sweaty, and was you think of kind of like a pig pen creature almost in that sense. He didn't learn anything. He found he didn't even learn all this fucking misery of being at the school. He didn't even learn anything. He says in the end, the Greek and Latin was basically all he was taught. And even then, it was poor. I couldn't afford the tutors for it, or my father couldn't afford the tutors for it. I've learned so far after I've learned better Latin, that I can read it and kind of express myself in it fairly passably. He recalls a really, really terrible thing where basically some boys had done some kind of unspeakable horror that he'd never even heard about what it was. But I remember well how on occasion 4 boys were selected as being the perpetrators of some nameless horror. What it was, to this day, I cannot even guess, but I was one of the 4, innocent as a babe, but adjudged to have been the guiltiest of the guilty. And he's basically told later, well, you came from a having come from a public school, it's probably supposed that he was the leader of whatever wickedness this was. It was like he was basically your scum. And so if there's something horrible's happened, then you must have been the leader and the originator of this. It's just like, God damn it. And so, but and then he goes to Winchester College for a while, but they basically the father can't afford stuff. His brother is ahead of him at Winchester College and just beats him savagely all the time. He says, "Oh, we're kind of better friends now. We're friends now," and stuff like that. But at the time, he just felt like, you're supposed to just beat someone, and he was just. It sounds like he just got unending beatings for all sorts of stuff. Um, you know, such thrashings should have been possible at a school as a continual part of one's daily life seems to me to argue a very ill condition of school discipline. And I mean, he basically says, like, if you could get beaten 5 times a day, I did. I probably did. At least I feel like I did. Um, he didn't have very much access to books. I mean, on this occasion, my amusement consisted in wandering about the old deserted buildings. This is at this farm, the chambers at Lincoln Inn. And in reading Shakespeare out of bi-columned edition, which is still among my books. It was not that I had chosen Shakespeare, that there was nothing else. And I mean, there's another part in here where he does talk about how he was in a thing, and there's basically just a couple, I think the first 2 volumes of some kind of not very good work, but he just read those over and over again. They're always in debt. He and his father and his brother, his mother, his mother, his mother, and their kids, and the kids, the younger kids, went off to America in some hopes of kind of generating income there. She finally does come back, writes a book, and is able to kind of make some money from that, and as a result, he is able to kind of get a little bit up, and there were sisters there, so he's a little bit better of appearance. But, just basically of those years is just like, it was like this position, by the end, when I left Harrow, I was nearly at the top of the school, being a monitor and I think 7th boy. This position I achieved by gravitation upwards. I bear in mind well with how prodigal a hand prizes used to be showered about, but I never got a prize. From the first to the last, there was nothing satisfactory in my school career, except the way in which I licked a boy who had been taken home to be cured. Yeah, it's like at one point he was getting so bullied and bashed about that at one point he beat another boy so badly that boy had to be taken home to be cured. And that's his only satisfaction from this time. So he was also kind of big. I get the sense that he was kind of a bit of a hulking figure. So it's like he wasn't like a skinny, abused nerd like me, but he was a big hulking, abused figure. And yeah, his only satisfaction was that one time that he got to beat the shit out of somebody. It's like, yeah. So that is the beginning of Trollope. Not a successful father, a mother who is in America, and came back and wrote a book, and this book did, and it's like, well, he's going to be launch on a career of being a novelist, and it's like, does this come from his mother? The next chapter, my mother. We'll see. All right, more videos later.